Alright guys, my name is Steed from Steeds Tech. I'm going to go over the benchtop tester. Now this benchtop tester has two inlets for air to help cool it, one on each side, and then there's an exhaust fan in the back. You also have a 15 amp breaker, your AC inlet. If you happen to be overseas, there is a switch right here that allows you to go from 110 to 220. Now that one's for the 12 volt power supply. The 24 volt power supply sits right here. You have to remove the lid and then flip the switch, put the lid back on. In the front, you have your on-off toggle switch. You have two green LEDs for 12 and 24 volts. Each LED is powered by its own individual power supply. So if the LED is not on, that means there's an issue with the power supply. The 12 and 24 volt blue LEDs is for to actually select which power you want. So if you have it on 12 volts, you have 12 volts, 350 watts of power coming out, 24 volts, 350 watts power coming out. The gray connectors for stepper motors, as well as other analog devices. The black connector is for CAN and pulse modulation. So I'm going to be demoing this on a whole set VGT. First thing we're going to do is just click on the icon. Once you're here, you're going to click the drop down for a COM port. Depending on your computer, you might have multiple COM ports. My computer only has two. I know my benchtop tester is connected to COM 14. I'm going to click connect. Now, depending on what device turbocharger you select, it's going to give you VGT status. Some of them, especially if they're analog, they don't have the feedback to actually detect it. You kind of just command it and it does what it does. The whole set actually has a lot of data coming off it, so when you plug into it, the VGT status is going to change. The firmware version is the firmware that's actually on the controller inside the box. So as I make revisions to controllers, to logic, stuff like that, the firmware version goes up. I routinely ask this based on when you call me for troubleshooting. I need to know what version you have. So when you click the turbocharger drop down, you can see all the turbochargers I can control. I can control Cummins whole set, the Detroit's whole set, the Duramaxes, Hinos, Internationals, and as well as Mac and Volvos. I can also control quite a few EGR valves. And then you come on over here to commanded position. Now, depending on what turbo or EGR you're controlling, depends on how the data is actually extrapolated. So if it's an analog device, the commanded position is going to basically be the command the controller is giving it. If it's a digital device like a whole set, I'm actually reading the information back from the whole set. So if the whole set says commanded position 50, that means my controller is actually commanding it to 50%. And then the controller is acknowledging that, giving me back that commanded position, and then it's going to give me an actual position where it's actually at. And then you have load, which is how much energy or how much effort it's actually pushing out. You have the board temperature. Now this isn't your water temperature of the vehicle, this is the board temperature of the actual controller. A lot of them have them, and a lot of them don't. So it really depends on what you're trying to control. So you have in Fahrenheit and Celsius, and then you have the EGR positions if you're trying to control an EGR. The exhaust fan's the actual fan in the back of the enclosure, tells you how fast it's spinning. Mine's spinning roughly 5,600 RPMs. You also have a sweep function on the right. That just basically commands from 0 to 100 and 100 to 0. You can watch the motor go back and forth. The reset's mainly for the stepper motors. It resets the counter of its position. Manual position allows you to manually open and close the turbo. So if you say 20, if you have a 20 in there, it's going to move to 20% of its travel. Whole set install is the whole install procedure for whole sets, and to calibrate. These two buttons are eventually going to just become one button, and depending on your selection, it's going to open up different windows. And then on the bottom right, you have your software version. This right here, the software, which is the GUI that you currently can see, you just download it from my website. Now when you plug in a whole set, and quite a few other ones, but I'm using the whole set as an example, that VGT status, which is currently yellow saying not detected, should give you something back. The actuator just plugged in was calibrated and I pulled it off, so it currently still believes it's calibrated. Now, if there's an error code in there, it's going to give you that error code, or if there's no data, like right now I'm just pressing the reset button, it's killing the power to the actuator, so it doesn't believe, well, there's nothing coming out of it, so it's no longer detecting it. Now I'm going to force an error code, so what I'm going to do is click on whole set install. Print this over so you can see it. So like I said, the current status is in operating because it believes it knows its position, and then it's waiting to see what's happening. So I'm going to click on calibrate. It's going to initialize. It's initialized. It's going to pass. It's going to zeroize. Zeroizing is exactly what it says here. Whole set VGT has erased current positional set points, i.e. zeroize. It no longer knows where it's at in its track. So no matter how many times you reset it, you can put it on any truck, it's not going to move anymore until you calibrate it. If the actuator is still connected to the turbocharger, remove the actuator at this time, because the next step, it's going to align the gear. Now I have an HE300VG. These generally don't move, but you still want to remove it just in case you get a newer one, or maybe there's an older one, or whatever the case might be. You have a 351, 4, or 500 series, it might move the gear. Once it's removed, it's going to rotate that gear. Mine doesn't move because, like I said, this one here doesn't move. And then once it's done, you're going to reinstall it to the turbo. I'm not going to install mine because I'm going to force that fault code. So now what it's doing is calibrating. It's going to keep moving, and it can't find a stopping point, so it's going to come up with an actuator desynced. Now to clear this code, all I got to do now is just press the reset button on the box. Now it says not detected. Go back. It's going to be to zeroize state. So if it's zeroize, it's already been initialized, so now it's waiting for that set gear. So I'm going to press calibrate. It's going to tell me to remove it because it's going to set the gear. Now that the gear is set, you can reinstall it to the turbo. So right now I'm reinstalling it to my center cartridge. So a few things are going to happen. It's going to be pretty quick. So once I click OK, it's going to calibrate. And once it says pass here, this is going to go to testing. And what's going to happen is it's going to start at 0 and it's going to count to 1. And then it's going to look for the feedback command, which is here, to say 1. Once the actuator says I'm at 1, it's going to command the 2. It's going to say 2 to 3, 3 to 4, all the way up to 100. Once it reaches 100, this is going to say pass because it reached 100% open. And then it's going to count all the way back down to 0. Once that happens, this is going to say pass, and then the actuator has passed its calibration test. So I want to see if I can move this fast enough to catch it all. So we'll click OK. It's calibrating, it's passed, so it's calibrating right now. Now as you can see, it's testing. Now you can see that range test completion, it's counting up. So once it reaches 50%, it's pulled all the way in. Now it's going back, well, all the way out, now it's going back in. Boom. So now you have a fully calibrated and passed actuator. So not only did you erase all the set points, you align the gear, you told it to calibrate, just for ensure that it's actually calibrated, you commanded it through a full range and it was able to go to all of its set points. If it wouldn't go to a set point, it'll give you an outer range here, and then there's a timer on it. So if it can't correct itself, maybe like the data's off a little bit, maybe the data's off a little bit, or whatever the case might be, it might take a second or so for it to actually jump up to its next set point. It's going to say fail. But there you have it. That's the whole set VGT. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the Hinos and the other devices that need to be calibrated. It might not be as in-depth because, like I said, the whole sets have a lot of data that they transmit and they want to have a lot of information and do it the right way. But the other ones are a little bit more simple. So whatever one that actually requires to be calibrated, When you click calibrate, it'll be similar to this, and then you'll get that 0 to 100, 100 to 0 range test, so you know that that device is actually calibrated. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, just send me an email or give me a call. Thanks.